My name's Jacob Restituto, and I'm a musician from Northport, New York, and I have a very special guest. A guest I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time. We have Hannah Brencher here on the channel, so thank you so much, Hannah, for taking the time to come on here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, and I'll have you introduce yourself in 2 seconds, but we were just chatting behind, I don't know if we could call it backstage or whatever you want to call it, back Zoom.
Yep, back Zoom.
About how it's a funny story about like how I found your work and all the stuff that you do a long time ago now, a couple of years back. You had this interaction with my wife, and she told me your story, and I was like, she has the craziest story. It's a very cool story, and I've been following your story ever since. Probably coming up on 7 or 8 years, so it's a pleasure to chat with you.
So insane. I love that so much. It's such a small world. Like it feels so big, but then like moments like this.
Absolutely. So for the people that are story and what you do and who you are.
Yeah. So my name is Hannah Brencher. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. Formerly from Connecticut, born, raised. And I am an author. I'm a writer, a speaker. I travel around the country when it's not pandemic times. Talking to individuals, sharing my story. I don't know if you want me to get into like the full backstory or if that's going to be something we're going to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. However you want to share it. If you want to share it right now, go for it.
So I'm sure the story that you heard once upon a time was about when I graduated from college, I moved to New York City. And that was the first time in my life that I experienced what I know now to be depression. I didn't have experience with depression beforehand. And I feel like 10 years ago when this story was happening, like mental illness was not something we talked about nearly as much. Like now at least we have like Mental Health Awareness Month. And I feel like we have more conversations, but like it was something where I didn't feel equipped to talk about it. And so I, as a way of coping with the depression, started writing letters and for other people to find. Seems quirky, seems a little weird because that's what it was, a little quirky and a little weird. But I grew up with a mom who wrote letters to me and would hide them places for me to find. And so I just did that for other people. I thought it was so normal. And I ended up blogging about it and basically saying like, if you need a love letter for whatever reason, I'll write to you. And I thought I would get like 3 or 4 people. Turns out I got over 400 people asking me to write to them, all handwritten letters over the next 9 months that created the foundation for the organization that I run today, a global love letter writing company, the first and only one. So,
well, that's quite the title to have.
Yeah, I know, only. Right? And not anything I was ever expecting. If you told me 10 years ago, I would have been like, huh?
Exactly. No. I mean, that's the story with everything. Everybody says it's so funny. Like everybody's like, you told me 10 years ago that this would be happening, but it's so true, man. It's wild. So. I one of the things I want to talk about that I appreciate is that like I've been following, like I mentioned, I follow your page and stuff, and it is really amazing how open you are about mental health and awareness. And as someone that struggled with anxiety in the past, I highly and working through it, I guess is the best way to say it. Much more so in the past than I do today. I appreciate and relate to a lot of the stuff that you talk about.
Thank you. Yeah, I think especially because. I don't know, like maybe it's because when I started my blog 10 years ago, I was 22 at the time, 21, 22. I didn't have like any kind of filter yet on life, like I felt like everything's fair game. Let's talk about everything, and I'm glad that I did that at such a young age because I think that like we get hardened over time. And so like I was always just accustomed to like share this part of your story and other people are empowered by it or encouraged by it or set free from it. And so when I went through depression, I think it was always just the same mindset of like, if I can help somebody else going through this, like, of course I'm going to share. Of course I'm going to be honest. Like, yeah, there's going to be some people that think that's too much honesty or that's too much vulnerability. But like, if we don't have these uncomfortable conversations, like the lives of people hang in the balance.
Absolutely.
And I am going to share my story if that means that somebody else finds freedom or that means that somebody else decides to stick around.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. And it'll probably never be something that we could ever calculate, but it is so encouraging to see, like, to wonder how many people you've helped,
Yeah. Because I'm sure there's so many people that have never reached out. I get
Sure.
the emails and I
Of
appreciate the
course.
emails of people that reach out, but like, you know, like on the internet, most of the people that are viewing or impacted by something are not the people that comment
Yeah.
or like leave a thumbs up or whatever it is.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and it's something I mean I think about all the time with YouTube, for example. Like there might be a whole bunch of views on a video, but then way less comments or interactions. So it is really interesting to see the impact that it might have with the unnoticed impact.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And that has always been like my thing from the very beginning of like, I think we live in this world where like people care so much about impact and metrics and numbers. And I very much am like, okay, like, I don't know. I look at it and I think, okay, that's not followers to me. Like those are living, breathing individuals. And like, what would it look like to walk around this earth and like know and believe that like some of our greatest impact is going to be impact we never ever even come to know about? And like, would that change the way that we like live our daily lives, or do we live our daily lives in the hopes that we will see all the impact? I think it takes away from like being like genuine and authentic and just showing up to be good people because that's what we're called to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You'll never know the impact that you're reaching, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the love letters part that we talked about in the beginning of the conversation?
Yeah. So I definitely feel like at the very beginning, like when I was writing and leaving these letters around New York City, I don't even know if I would go back now and like call them like, I guess I'd still call them love letters, though I feel like a lot of it was like I needed to find a way to get these feelings out of me and be as honest as I could be. And I also knew that they were like anonymous, so it didn't matter what I said because it's like New York City. It's a massive city. It's like no one's going to find me. And so I always get people that ask me like, oh, you signed the letters, right? So people could find you. And I was like, no, like I started doing that maybe halfway through because everybody told me I should, but I really didn't have any desire to be found, you know? Like I just wanted somebody to know like, hey, like if you're going through something hard, or if you're kind of feeling like you moved here and you thought it was going to be different, like I just want you to know that like you're not alone in that.
Sure.
Because I think like my dream in life was to move to New York City. That was it. Like that was like my whole entire existence apart from wanting to write books when I was younger. And then I moved to this city and I'm like, like it's a very magical city, I will say that, but like it felt very lonely and I felt very disconnected, and it was a very weird feeling to wrestle with, where like you could be so surrounded by people and feel so alone. And so the letters made me feel closer to like, I don't know, closer to my roots, to my mom, to my friends. I was the girl that was like known to write letters to all of her friends when I was in college, and they thought that that was really like quirky. And letter writing has just always been a part of me and an extension of me, and it's still something that I do now. I still write letters to my husband. I write letters to my readers. I write letters to my daughter because I think, well, this is what they're going to have of me and hold of me if I'm not here anymore. And I think so often we're living so much on our phones that we're like missing that tangibility element. That's why I love letters.
Yeah, absolutely. And could you like elaborate in the sense of like what one of the letters might have said?
Yeah, so most of the letters, you know, I was always kind of sharing stories of like where I was at or what I was going through or what I was encountering. But it always brought it back around to the individual who may have picked up the letter, to encourage them and remind them to keep going, to keep showing up. Like basically all the words I needed for myself that I couldn't give myself at that time, I was giving to somebody else. And so that shifted from day to day based on whatever I was thinking or feeling or encountering.
It's so interesting because I feel like it so relates to songwriting, you know, being a musician. It's real, like so often artists will write songs, you know, especially depending on the genre, but like will write songs that they want to hear themselves kind of thing, you know, like,
totally, yeah.
Like you're going to make it through kind of thing, or like don't stop believing, or any of them. Like very often, at least in my own writing, you know, experiences, it's like sometimes what would I need to hear at the moment kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very similar concept.
Totally. Because I mean, like I help people on a daily basis, you know, like write letters or figure out what to write in letters. Because even for the organization today, like people get nominated and then we blast them with a bunch of letters, and people are always like,
That's cool.
Well, what do you write in a letter to somebody you don't know? And one of my first tips is always like, you know, what do you need to hear today?
Yeah.
What do you need to be reminded of? And I do the same thing through like my writing online, through my social media. Like if ever I feel stuck, I'm like, okay, what are the words that I need to know and remember today? Because chances are I am not the only one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about that a lot. Like when you feel stuck, like that's one of the things I feel like at least I feel like, you know, based on your social media, it's one of the core elements of like, you know, just keep like sitting down, and you're really diligent about your work as a writer, you know. And I appreciate I appreciate your structure. What was it?
I'm a discipline freak. I
hear you on that one.
Yeah,
very routine.
I am, and it's interesting. I think I always had that in regards to like my writing. Like I was always very consistent with that, and I don't think it's because like, I don't know. I think at that point, like I've always been like an overachiever in that sense, but I didn't feel like I really had discipline in other areas of my life. Like I wouldn't say that I was like the most disciplined in like my relationships or like my health or like, you know, but I've learned that like discipline is like a muscle. So it's like you train it over time. And the more that you train it, like the easier it becomes for like discipline to spread into other areas.
Couldn't agree more with that.
But people don't want to train, though.
100%.
Don't want to do it.
I agree with that, actually, and it is some. You know, it's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't know if you've ever had this thought process, but it's like when I was younger, I feel like I was very, very, very disciplined, and I feel like now I'm like, am I as disciplined, you know, as I was? And my thought process. It's funny you say that, was like, I think I've just grown used to the discipline. It used to suck. And now it doesn't suck as much anymore because I'm used to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very interesting that you say that. Absolutely. It becomes easier over time.
Well, especially like in regards to like mental health, because I feel like especially depression could be the first thing to just like derail you from discipline. You know, it's like it wants you to stay in bed. It wants you to isolate. It wants you to not work out, not eat good foods. And like I get these messages and emails from people that are like, I don't know, like almost like, it must be so hard for like you to get through the day and like all that. And I just kind of want to be like, not really, you know, like I've been in like, as I call it, like remission from depression since 2015. And that doesn't mean I haven't had seasons of like up and down, you know, but like, I think that the discipline that I started building coming out of that depression has compounded so much that it's just a part of what I do, you know? And so it's like, for me, I think other people might look at my lifestyle and be like, wow, she's really regimented. She's really disciplined, or like, that's exhausting, you know? But I'm like, this is what keeps me healthy. This is what allows me to thrive. This is what allows me to show up. I would be a mess without this stuff. It doesn't mean that like, I don't say, okay, like, you know what, today my body's tired. I'm going to give it a break and not do the workout, you know? Like, I have those days, I have those moments, but like, this is just kind of like what allows me to operate in the freest space. Yeah. I wish more people would just start, you know?
It's absolutely, it's so funny. It's so, but I think we also forget how hard it was to start at the beginning too. But I think it's a different, it's just certain people function certain ways, I guess, you know, and I don't know. It's hard, you know, so I see some of my friends sometimes and I'm like, oh, I wish you would just be more disciplined, but it's like, it's hard for me to impose my version of discipline in there, you know. So I have a question. You mentioned something about your writing process and how so often, you know, we look at these metrics, right, of you know, how many people are we influencing, how many people are seeing, liking, viewing, reading. And so often, you know, some of the biggest impact is the unnoticed people, like the people that, you know, the shadow watchers, right? The people that watch in the shadow but never make a comment, never like a post, never send you a message. And those people, very often, I feel like, especially with, you know, talking in the mental health area, are probably the people that are getting the most out of it. You know, like the people, very often it's the sanguines and stuff that are commenting on every single comment, or, you know what I mean? It's not usually not. But as a writer and as somebody that, you know, part of your income comes from your writing and your books and stuff like that. And it's similar to my story. How do you personally find the balance of like, these metrics are what to some degree pays your bills?
Yeah. And yes, okay, that's a great question. I think personally, a lot of it has come down to my faith, honestly. I think that it's something that I've had to like continually hand back to God, because it's not something I want to hold for myself, of like, I don't have as much control as I think I have.
Absolutely.
You know, like I'll write a blog post that I think is awesome, and that will be the one I hear crickets on.
100%.
And then I'll write a post that I don't think much of. It took me 20 minutes to write, and it will go viral, you know? And so I'm like, I can control some elements and work hard in these areas. And I do believe that we should do that. But at the end of the day, however this is going to spread and the impact that it's going to have is not up to me. Yeah. That's kind of how I view it. And it takes the pressure off of me. But at the same time, like, I definitely have become more savvy over the years of like learning about marketing, learning about metrics, learning about like, okay, like how do I market myself well? Because in some respects we have to do that. Like we have to market especially if you release books through a traditional publisher or self-publishing, you have to be your own marketing machine. And so I had to get to the point where like I didn't cringe over the idea of marketing myself. And the only way that I've been able to do that is to genuinely like pour my heart into everything that I create and seek to help people with the things that I create. It doesn't feel icky for me to like quote unquote promote something that I think is helpful, that might change somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to some degree, like, you know, it's very similar. I relate very much to the whole, like, you know, some things being a flop, some things being amazing, and you never know which. And as a songwriter,
don't know what it is.
You never know. That's why you just got to put out, you know, and you got to put out as much as you can, because you never know which is going to be the next big one, or you know. And it's funny, like we talk about metrics again, like that. The big one, you know, may be seen by a lot of people, but you don't know if that one person was impacted by that one cricket one. You know what I mean?
Well,
and you never know the impact of that.
You don't ever know the impact. Like I wrote a post, I think I was like 23 when I wrote it, called 25 Things Every Woman Needs to Know. But how did I know that? I didn't. And it was just a fun little list for me, and I published it. And I think I went off to like community group or something. And this thing went wildly viral, like over and over and over again. Like I will still hear from readers that are like, I found you through your 25 Things Every Woman Needs to Know list. And like, I look back on that and I'm like, what were you doing? What? Like this is not the list I would form today, but like that was the list that went viral then. And you know, a lot of people loved it and a lot of people hated it because you know, I remember I got this email from this one guy that was like, my mom has been through the Cold War. Like, do you think this is what she needs to know? And I was like, no, I don't know. Like, but that's the thing about like pressing publish. And like you said, I think that like, just get yourself into the space of like practicing as much as you can. Like, I think about like, you know, like a medium like YouTube, where I'm like, oh, like maybe I'll release a few YouTube videos, you know, like I think that could be a cool platform for me. But I'm kind of in this mindset of just like, okay, so like, I don't think I need to buy all this fancy software to start. I don't think I need like all of these fancy gadgets. Like I just need to start. And if the content is good, then people they'll get something from it. And it's like you said, they won't comment, they might share, we don't really know. But like I get emails every single week from my Monday morning email club from people that are like, I read all of your emails and I never respond, and this is the first time I'm responding. And I'm like, okay, so if this happens every single week, there's so many more people that I can't even imagine. And if I just take my eyes off of that and just focus on doing the good work, like that's the sweet spot. And that's I don't mean to be like getting on like my high horse or anything, but like I wish more creators would just sink deep and fall in love with the creation process. Like, just do it for the creation process, because that's where the gold is. Like, that is where you will become yourself. You will not become yourself through growth, through platforms, through any of that stuff. You won't. It's the creation process. If you don't love the creation process, get out now. Get out now.
Yeah, it's so true. Because if it takes 10 years for you, you're going to have to create a lot for if it's going to take 10 years for you to get where you quote unquote want to go, you know, and it's hard though. As somebody that, you know, so a little bit of my story backing up. I've been a musician for about seven years. I dropped out of college 7 years ago. Almost 8 years ago now, which is wild. That being said, it took me a while. I mean, I wore so many different hats for so long, you know, working in my parents' office, you know, creating music, you know, working in an art gallery, creating music, having 20 guitar students, creating music on this, you know, like, and now at 2021 is my first year fully employed by my music. You know what I mean? So it's taken a long time. But I love the journey, but it is a very interesting, and maybe you could speak on this. It is a very interesting, it's hard sometimes to focus on the creation process when there's no income coming in. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yep.
And it's like, okay, I just want to get to this point where blank, you know, but it's so funny, man. I've at least learned, and I'd love to know your thoughts, is like, even when there's always the next blank. There's always the next, you know, I just need to get to here and then blank. I'll be happy with this. But it's always, at least if you're a go-getter, like my personality, it seems like your personality is like, there's always going to be the next line that you want to get to. And that can lead to constant unhappiness.
Totally. And that's where I think, like, it is important, like, to be in love with that creation process. And like, I don't like, from the very beginning of when I started, I don't know why, I think I had some appreciation for the long haul. That's one of the things where it's like, it's really hard within our culture to talk about the long haul, because people want the overnight success. And like, we're living in this weird culture where like, you literally could make a TikTok video and be viral overnight. Like, the algorithms set you up for that. But here's the thing. It is not going to make you any bit happier. It is not going to fill that crater within your soul. It's just not. And so I think it almost is like, whereas like, I kind of had the opposite, in the sense of like, I graduated from college, I started leaving these letters, and then I did an audition for TED that ended up being a TED Talk. And overnight, my life flipped upside down. I went from like, I'm doing my thing and I've got a small audience, to like over 1 million views in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
And like, TED is like TED, you know? Yeah. And I had agents reaching out to me. I had literary agents. I had people trying to buy my life rights. I was all of a sudden like booking speaking engagements all over the country. Like, it was exactly what any person would say they wanted, because that is the stuff that means that you quote unquote matter. And I'll be very honest, like, I became addicted to it. Like, I still had a good heart, a good head on my shoulders, but like, I was ready for the next impressive thing and the next impressive thing. And I always say that like, I confused the things that God gave me as being more valuable than like God himself. And I really think that led to the depression that I experienced in 2014. That was like life-threatening. Like, I didn't know if I was coming out of it. If I had dealt with depression before in 2010, then like, this needed a completely different name, because it was so completely different in nature. But like, doctors told me it was like a nervous breakdown. It was like so much success and so much stimulation and so many benchmarks that I wasn't taking care of myself. Like, I was just packing up my suitcase, going to the next place. And so it's like, I've seen all of the stuff that's on the quote unquote mountaintop. And it's like, it will not fill you. It will not make you one bit happier. Like, it doesn't mean that stuff isn't beautiful, but if like, that's all you're reaching for, you're going to get there and you're going to not know how to appreciate it. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can probably look back on your own journey and you can say, okay, like, I'm so thankful that this is the year that I am like full-time and doing this thing, but I'm thankful because I've seen the hustle that it took to get to this place. And like, I wish that more people talked about that hustle within the creation process, or
absolutely,
you know, like sorry.
No, continue, please. Yeah.
Like Gary Vaynerchuk always talks about like
big fan of Gary V.
And it's like, yeah, I'm a big Gary V guy.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Like,
that's funny. I didn't know that.
Yes. But he's always saying document. And it's like, that is the most compelling content that you can put out there. But it is also going to require that like you be in your work and you be in your life, you know? And like people always reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, I love just what you put out there on Instagram makes me feel like I can go and live my life. And I'm like, then you should just go, just do it. Like if you want to write, you need to sit down and write. You want to do music, you need to sit down and do music. And like, I know it can be exhausting and there can be times where you're like, I just want to be out of this season. But like, I don't know, in those seasons, like I always look back and think like there was so much there. You
can always see it in hindsight, right? My constant prayer is that I could see the good times in the moment rather than the good old days, right? I don't want to reflect on the good old days. I want to recognize them in the moment as they're happening.
In the moment, yeah, in the moment. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I do not want to belittle any person who has been, hustling and grinding and feels like it's just not happening. I've been there. I felt that in certain areas of life. And so it's like, I empathize with you. I totally do. But like, I also feel like, well, if you quit, like, I don't know, like I think about writing and I'm like, writing is like the thing that makes me feel the most me. It is the thing that makes me feel the most connected to God. So if I quit that, I would not be myself anymore.
Absolutely.
You know?
There's no alternative for me doing music.
Exactly.
Dropping out of college, people were like, what's your plan B? I'm like, I can't survive doing anything. Like I would be so unhappy doing anything else other than music that there just wasn't another option.
Yeah, absolutely. And good for you that you dropped out. That you were like, like I quit my full-time job that had like benefits, salary, all these things to like pursue a dream that I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. But like, I'm so thankful that I did because like I've been working for myself now for 9 years. And to me, that's crazy. I'm like, what? Like, doesn't mean it's been easy. Does not mean that like I haven't taken on so many projects behind the scenes that like people, like I think people have this perception of like, oh, you just like sit in coffee shops all day and like write words. And it's like, oh, there's been so many things that I've had to say yes to like get to this place. And it's like, do it and like learn from it and then move on to the next thing. But like, we're a generation that's like, well, if it's not the dream, then I don't want to do it. And it's like, well, sometimes you just need to scrub the floors and then.
That is such an interesting thing. And it's a debate that I think is talked about a lot, in the music industry, in my industry, and a lot of industries. Is like, where do you find that balance of like doing things that you want to do, versus the things that you pay the bills. And that kind of want to piggyback on what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And it's I being a big Gary V fan, I literally document everything. If somebody were to look at the live streams that I have on my channel, it's like I'm scheduling YouTube videos, I'm live interacting with everybody on the community. I'm
I love it.
Songwriting on a live stream. Like I document everything. But the question that I want to follow up with that is like, how do you personally find the balance of between doing the things that you might want to do, might want to write about versus the things that pay the bills?
Yeah. I think that it's like, cause I feel like, and I think it still happens now where it's like, okay, like I'm in a space right now where it's like, I'm working full time, supporting my family while my husband is with our baby, and like, that's not something that like we talk about a ton in our world of like, it's still very like, I guess, edgy. I don't know. But I wish that we talked about it more. But I think when you get into that space, like a project might come along that you're not that passionate about, that you don't necessarily want to do, but it is a good paycheck. And I think at some point, like, you make those choices and those sacrifices to support your family and to do what you have to do. And like, I think that like, there is that balance, but I will tell you that there was like so long that I did projects that just like did not light me up inside. I did not like them. I did a lot of ghost writing. I did plenty of things that were not my passion, but I knew this is the next step to get me to where I want to go. And also, if I treat all of this as a learning experience, then something is going to come out of it, you know?
Absolutely. It is so funny. Sorry.
So
funny to see some of the things that I've done over the years. That be like, oh, wow, you know, I'm grateful that I did that because now blank. Now, you know, like, it is so interesting to see how all these things piggyback onto the next thing.
It's like when I graduated from college and I moved to New York, my job was supposed to be a liaison for a non-governmental organization at the United Nations. So it's like, everyone's like, oh, that's such an impressive title.
Quite the title. Exactly.
Yeah. And I will tell you, there was literally no work for me, like no work. I had to create the work. I had to just like show up at the UN and pick what meetings I was going to go to and figure it out. And like, I was able to thankfully like build myself up to like a part-time position, but it was not a full-time position. They always say the guy that was before me, the year before, he like just wanted to hang out in New York City all the time. And so he said it was a full-time position. It was not. But I like went out looking for work, and I lived in the Bronx, and I found a preschool right next door, and I became a preschool teacher. Like, and I didn't even know if I liked kids or not. Like, I wasn't sure, but like, I wanted to fill some kind of need. And I remember like getting to know the woman who like ran this preschool and like ran this life center. And I went to her and I said like, hey, like, I could continue to be a preschool teacher, like if that's what you really need from me. And I was like, but I noticed that you don't have a website, you don't have a Facebook, you don't really have any kind of online presence. So like people can't find you. And like, I'm good at that stuff, you know? And so then she like gave me a computer and I started working in an office for her. And like, she like couldn't like pay me, you know, like it was volunteer work, but like, it was such a crucial time in my life of like, don't just do what you're passionate about, like do what is necessary, do what other people need of you. And it's like, I learned so much from getting to spend time with these women, from getting to build their website, build their online presence and all this stuff. And I look back and I think like, would I have loved a more glamorous job at the United Nations? Like, sure. But like, I learned so much and I grew so much from that. And also on the other side, like I was really able to like grow in this role at the UN. I met friends that I have for life now. I worked with a organization for girls' education and I found out that was my passion. And like, I got to be a researcher for them. And the reason that I stepped into my first full-time job at Save the Children was because I was there at the UN. But like, it meant that I had to like go out there. I had to introduce myself to people. I had to do some work that I didn't necessarily want to do, but like, I said yes to like everything that I could get my hands on because I knew it was going to be part of my experience.
Absolutely. How did you, so one of the things you mentioned triggered a thought in me, the similar thought is the sense of like you said, you noticed this lady didn't have a social media presence. So you went and helped to create a social media presence. And it's one of the things that I've had to deal with in my journey is this, you know, I knew that I knew what to do. And I was always the guy that like had the right concepts and everything, but I never had that social proof until recently, you know, and it was really hard to be like, do I really know what I'm doing or am I just crazy? Because I would do all this stuff, you know, and I'd get, not that, like I mentioned, like we talked about, not that the accolades are the you know, and the acknowledgments are the goal, but like I do put all this work in, post all this stuff on social media, and I get a like here, a view here. Like, you know, I was like, this has to be the stuff, and I just felt crazy, right? Because there was no proof of the concept until recently, until finally years after years of doing it, it's finally paid off. And I think that's something that I think needs to be talked about more often is like, you know, sometimes you just have to accept the fact that you might look crazy in front of your friends or your family, and you might look like the guy that, you know, that doesn't know what they're doing and or flopping around. But I'd love to know your perspective on that. Was there ever a time like that you felt like people thought you might have been crazy for trying this, or it took a while for you to actually receive the goals that you were trying to go for, right? You know, but you were doing it for so long. You're sowing the seeds for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is still an everyday battle.
Yeah, you know? Sure.
Like some people still will look at you and have no idea what you do for work or no idea what you do for a living. And like, there's a part of me, and I'm sure you felt this too, that it's like you want to justify. You want to be like,
oh my gosh, 100%.
I want to tell you I'm successful. But then I'm also like, that is not my battle to fight. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? But
that is such a hard thing to fight. It's completely, at least in myself, I found it's completely based in insecurity of myself that I'm like, I want to show you that I mean something, you know, I want you to think I'm cool. 100%. That is such a hard battle to fight.
It's such a hard battle, but I've had to say recently, like, this is not my battle to fight. The people that think I can just come hang out at like 2 p.m. on a random day, or the people that think I go and I do speaking engagements for free, I just have to like let it go, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, I think though, I've definitely felt that frustration, but I think, here's the thing, my mom, I attribute like everything to my mom. And like 5 years ago, like right before Elaine and I were getting married, I was asked to speak like on a very like at a very prominent women's conference with like a lot of like prominent like women ministers and stuff. And like I get asked to do this thing and I immediately like, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like, whoa, like I'm going to be in the likes of these people. This is crazy. I don't belong here, you know? And I remember calling my mom and telling her about this thing. And she just was like, imagine the stuff that you are going to learn. Imagine what you're going to learn.
Wow.
And I was like, I should have thought of that beforehand, you know, like of like, but that was such a perspective changer for me of like, if I can just show up every single day and vow to learn as much as I possibly can, like I'm going to be the one that benefits, you know? And so it's like, I would say that to anybody starting out that is like not getting the traction they want or like not getting what they want. It's like, well, go in and try to learn as much as you can, because like you will never like regret a day of that learning, of like that knowledge of like, okay, like, you know, you put a post out there, this one does really well and this one doesn't do well. Like, look at it a little bit more, you know, like what's going on here? Study it, like become a student of the things that you're producing. And I feel like for you, you're like, okay, like I did a lot of things for a long time that people thought maybe I'm crazy. But I look at it and I think, well, thank God that that's your story, because there's so many people out there that are in that right now.
Absolutely.
They're not seeing traction and they're not seeing results. And you are able to speak to that. You have the experience because you have lived that story. And I think, I just get so amped about it because I think like we are a generation of people that like, we want to reach the end result, but we don't want to live the story, you know? Absolutely.
And that's really, I mean, a lot of these conversations that I've had, I mean, they all stem from the concept of like, I was told forever that it wasn't possible, right? And now I'm living proof that it is, you know, and I like hearing the stories of other people that it actually is. And it's one of the things that I am so, you know, adamant about is like telling that story and showing, like I have this post on my Instagram. I posted, I looked at it yesterday. So it was 20 weeks ago, it said, so whatever that was. I don't know why they don't just say the actual date, but,
that's true.
Regardless, though, it was the first 7 years. It was when I had a month that it was I had just broken over 1 million views a month on YouTube.
Yeah.
And which I was amped about. But like so many people were like, "Oh, I wish I could be like my channel is that big." Oh, you know, there's so many of those comments that I receive that I'm like, look, I'm so adamant about showing the process that it was years of nothing. And if people go to look at that post, it was I started, I think, in 2013. It was like, it just showed the month, the views per month and the subscriber growth. And I think in 2013, the whole year, I grew like 4 subscribers. And I had like, you know, it was a month of 8 views, 12 views, 35 views. And it was like that for 8 years or 5 years until like the 8th year. Where that's the year that was like, oh, 100,000 views a month, 300,000 views a month, 5, you know, that it's like, yeah, cool. You look at that one snippet in time, but it was years of nothing. And people are like, oh, you're such a hard worker. I'm like, yeah, but I'm no different than you. If you just want to put the same amount of work in that I put in over the past couple years, you know, I think that it's a really, it's possible. I say I'm no different than you. You know what I mean?
I 100% agree with you. And I think like staying faithful to like an avenue or a medium, whatever that is. I think the problem right now is that everybody wants to be everything.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's like, oh, well, like I could have a blog, but I could also be on YouTube, but I could also be a podcast host, and there's like so many things that people want to chase after. And I'm like, just pick one avenue and just stick with it. Like be consistent with it. Like I like started my blog 10 years ago, and same thing of like, I'm writing and I like know the people that are like reading my blog posts. I like go to college with them and stuff. It's my mom. And, like readers start to show up that are like, I don't know them. I don't know that person in the UK. Okay, this is kind of cool. And like your readership starts to grow and grow. But like what I realized over time is that like, I started to get more and more like unhappy in some of the spaces that I was in, like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like now I feel like I have to do this to keep up. And now I feel like I have to do this to keep up. And what I did a year and a half ago is I went right back to the blog. That had always been my favorite thing. That had always been my love. And I said, I'm going to like recommission myself to this space. And it has been so good for me because that is the element like that I love creating in. And then I'm able to show up on all these other platforms like social media, Instagram and Twitter and all this stuff, and share the thing that I created from my heart in this space, in my main avenue.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think too often we are spreading ourselves so thin. We're like, I have to be over here. I have to be over here. I have to be over here. It's like, what would it look like to plant in one space for a little while and faithfully build there? I'm not saying you can't take on another avenue at some point, but like have a home base, like have a place where you keep showing up, even if there's 4 subscribers the whole entire year. Somebody else would have been like, it didn't work. I'm done now, and it's like, no, keep showing up, keep being consistent. Like you don't know the impact that you're having, and it's not for you to know.
Yeah. And being a Gary Vee fan, I'm sure you've heard the fact of like, he says, how many famous artists, quit one day too early, and what if tomorrow was the day you would release that?
Wait, yes. Okay. Wait, we got to talk about this. Okay. Maybe you've even seen this person. You go on TikTok, you watch TikTok.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen Vault Boy Music?
Maybe.
There's a song
I follow
out there right
a lot
now
of
called,
musicians on TikTok. So, okay, continue with that though.
He's got this song right now, and it's like, it goes, everything sucks. Not real. It's everywhere on TikTok now. And I look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, because years ago, 2014, I went to a house show for an artist, Jeremiah Daly, playing his guitar. And I have been a fan of this kid forever. I love him. Like, I just love his music. I just have always been a fan of him. But I was like, what's going on? Like, why is he not famous right now? Like he's got so much talent. And like, all of a sudden I stumble across a video on TikTok and it's him. And I'm like, holy goodness, like he's blowing up all over the place. But like, it wasn't an overnight thing for him. It was house shows where there wasn't a lot of people. It was playing at barns in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And like, I've seen his journey, and I know that there's probably so much more to the journey that I haven't even seen. But I think like, yes, like you continue to show up.
I love that story.
No,
that's amazing.
It's just,
that is so encouraging.
But I think too, like one of the things that like I do that like I think probably is a lot of times like inspired by Gary Vee is that like I am very much of like, okay, like if I'm gonna try this, what can I learn in the process? If I'm gonna do this, what can I learn in the process? And then it's like that will eventually at some point become content that you can use, but like if you just show up to like learn as much as you can and like document your process, not even like for other people, but like for yourself, that you can look back over the last 7 years or 10 years to be like, whoa, like this was happening or that was happening, or this is how I grew there. It's like, like, I don't know. I think that what makes me like, what grieves me is that like, we do want to live so much of our lives for other people, but like, are we missing the life that is right here? Like, is life really just the behind the scenes stuff? Because I remember when I had like 5 readers and you could not take from me the magic that I felt every night sitting down to like write my blog post. Like that magic is still with me and I will never be able to duplicate it. Like same thing with starting more love letters.
Yeah.
Those 2 a.m. hours that like, it was just me up with the world, you know, like I think back and I think like, that's the good stuff. Like be there, be in that process. Cause you're going to look back one day and it's going to be gone.
It is so true. I couldn't agree more with that, you know, enjoying the process because so it's funny. So we're talking about documenting the process. We're talking about enjoying the process. And back when I dropped out of college, so I'm terrible with math. So I realize I'm coming up in my 7th year, not in my 8th year. Okay. I want to clarify that. So July 3rd, 2014, okay. I dropped out of college, May, whatever. Yeah. Well, so yeah, college was like probably May it ended, right? Or whenever college ends. But July 3rd, 2014, so 7 years ago and 3 days or whatever that is, I started journaling my process. Every single night I have what I did that day and how I'm doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm coming up on 7 years of every single day. And it's the point of that is I haven't shared it with anybody yet. Like my goal,
say, where's the video on that? I want to watch it.
It's a legit journal. I actually debated. It's so a lot of it's pretty personal too, so I have to figure out how I'd want to do it. But it's straight up every single day. So I'll explain why I did it, and then I'll explain the point about why I'm bringing this up. When I started, I have some high goals for myself, you know, where I want to go, you know, career wise, and I'm like, I have no idea how to get there, and if only there was some sort of roadmap. I'm like, well, there isn't, so I believe I'm going to get there one day, and I'm going to create the roadmap. You know, and my journey is not going to be your journey. It's not going to be Joe's journey and Sally's journey. But you know what? If they read my journey, they can cherry pick. Oh, that's such a good idea. Maybe I could try that. Maybe it'll spark something in them to try something, right? Yep. So like that was the goal with it. And I want to share the journey. I also want to share like, hey, it wasn't an overnight success. I played a show and there was 3 people there and 2 people were making out in the corner. So there's one person, you know what I said?
In there.
My favorite story, tangent, is when I played a gig, one of my first gigs, and there was nobody there, that the bartender went in the back. So I was playing to an empty room.
My heart.
But that's the story, and I document that, and I tell that story, and that's whenever that was, you know, sometime in 2015 that happened, you know. It's like, the point being that, like, looking now when you said documenting the journey for other people, but also for yourself, and the truth in that statement is now I look back on some of those things and be like, oh my gosh, remember when I was so excited when I first overnight, like I got 3,000 views in a day, and I was like, that blew my mind, you know what I mean? And it's like looking back on those moments to help you. I think they keep you humble and grateful, you know, because at least for myself, I've found so often the continual chase for growth that I forget that I was one day hoping for 1,000 views a day. Now I'm hoping for, you know, or like, you know.
Yep.
Or I see the channel go from, you know, say 3 million views a month to 1.4. And I'm like, oh man, that's like, you know, it dropped half in views for whatever reason, you know, maybe I'm not posting, whatever the case is. But I'm like, but if I look back at my journal or the vlog or whatever, you know, whatever I'm doing, it's like, I remember when I first had 100,000 views for the month, you know what I mean? And I was so excited about that. It's like, okay, that was 4 months ago. Like, keep perspective, Jake. You know what I mean? Like, it's so important documenting for other people, but documenting for yourself to keep the perspective.
I could not agree with you more. Like, I do it in my work. I do it in my personal life. And like, I was literally just like thinking about this today, was just about how like, when I went through that like depression in New York City, like I carried a notebook around with me like everywhere, but I didn't really like document things. I kind of just like at that point in my life, I really like lived in my own head. Like I was like writing stories all the time. So I look back on those journals and it was very much like not a lot of what was going on and way more like very like, you know, stories and then like prayers and like, God, where are you? And it's kind of depressing. But what was so hard was when I went to write my first book, I didn't really have much to go off of because my journals were not full of like my firsthand experience. You know, I look back and I'm like, I wish I had documented that better. It'd be a lot easier to write out of like what, like our memories are faulty to begin with, you know? And so what happened was like, when I went through that life-threatening depression, I had a Word document that I had open on my computer at all times. And every single day I made myself sit down and document the day of what had happened and what I had walked through, because I knew at some point I'm going to come out of this, and I'm going to write a book one day about this, about coming out of these woods. And I want to be able to look back on the process of like what was really going on in the moment, you know? And so it's like, you don't ever know, like so much of this that you have been documenting, like that's not one video, like that's so many videos and so much content that is going to encourage other people. And like, the beautiful thing is that you've like written it over time and you've stockpiled it, because I caution people that are like, their lives are the content. Our lives are not meant to be content. Our lives are not meant to be consumed in that way. That's a really dangerous way to live, I think, is like, if I'm content for you, or if my marriage is content for you, or if my baby is content for you. I just don't think it's healthy, but I see a lot of people doing it, you know? And I think that like there should be distance between the things that we're creating and then like our actual real everyday lives, you know? But what's beautiful about what you've done is like you've stockpiled it over 7 years, that like when you go to talk about something that was like 5 years ago, like you're not in that space anymore. You're not in that. It's not going to take from you to share that wisdom with somebody else. And I think, you know, so often we get into this space of like, my life needs to be interesting because my life is the content. And I would do anything to save somebody from that space, because it's an empty space.
Yeah. Always looking for the next thing. Absolutely. Yeah. But like you say, it's looking back on it now, like it's such a good remembrance of like, oh my gosh, remember when, or talking, you mentioned depression, how you used to have that Word document open, like, you know, struggling with anxiety. Like, I remember, like, it's so easy to get caught up in like, oh my gosh, I'm still struggling with this. But then I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, if I was struggling this much, I'm still struggling, but now it's this much. Remember when it was, we get so caught up in our head in these timelines and feelings, but when we actually look back and be like, oh, it was nowhere near where I am today. You know what I mean? It's such good perspective things. But I know that we are running low on time, and I want to be respectful of your time. So first of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time.
This has been so much fun.
It has been. I've definitely enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to for everybody else seeing what we talked about today. But the question I have for you is, what is the best way that people can support you and what you are doing today?
Yeah, you can just head over to hannahbrencher.com. I blog there every week, and everything that I do, I have plenty of free resources, my books, all of that stuff is over at hannahbrencher.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Which all the links for social media and the website is all in the description already, so you could just click that right away. Awesome. But last question that I have for you is, if looking back, you said you've been self-employed 9 years, you've been doing this for a while. Looking back on yourself, what is one thing that you wish you knew 9 years ago that you know today?
I think that this is something that I'm like learning now. I think that like, especially because like we're in this like, I feel like we're in this like culture of hustle, you know, where it's like, I love the hustle, I love the grind, but I've started to realize lately that I'm like, if I'm feeling pressure, a lot of times it's like pressure I've placed on myself. You know what I mean? Like, and I've realized lately,
I do know what you mean.
Like self-employed, and I wake up and I'm like, I got to get to this. I got to go to these. And then I'm like, wait, but like, if I wanted to have a chill morning, like, couldn't I? Like, isn't that what I worked so hard to get to?
Okay, you're speaking to me right now, because it's literally the same exact thing that I think about all the time.
Yeah, but like, and that's where it's like, I'm having to like learn that right now. Like the pressure that you're applying is coming from nowhere but yourself.
100%.
So like, it doesn't mean that like, obviously, like if I take a morning off, I'm not going to be like, I'm never going to work again. I'll be right back at it tomorrow. But like, isn't that like what, I don't know about you, but like, that's what I worked so hard for.
Yeah.
Like, get to this place where like, when I had my first baby, I would be able to raise her and still work. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm living in that right now. I'm living in that dream. But if I'm not careful, it's going to slip through my fingers. I'm never going to have been grateful for it. You know what I mean? And so it's like taking the pressure off, it's not as serious as you think it is. Like just because you eliminate the pressure and you enjoy yourself a little bit does not mean that like you're not going to get to where you need to be going or that you're not a hard worker.
It is true.
That's for you.
Thank you. Yes, it was for me because it's something I think about and struggle with, you know, so often, you know. Speaking, I'm realizing we have very similar like personality types, a very go-getter personality, very regimented personality. And it's something I think about all the time where it's like, I know that I'm self-employed, so I should be enjoying the self-employed life, but it's so hard for me to because I'm always working for that next thing. And it's like, you're totally right. And looking back, talking about the journaling, all the times that I did go away with family or do something with my wife, or it's like, I'm still here today. I still made it to where I am today. So it's like, all the times that I was stressed about not being able to work because of whatever reason, I still made it to where I am today. So it's like, going forward, I have to keep that mentality.
Well, and you know, like I will always remember this advice from a friend of mine that like went through a divorce, and she was like, looking back, if I could do anything differently, she was like, I was invested in my business and he was invested in his business. And what we forgot is that like our marriage was a business itself, that we were meant to pour into it as much as we were pouring into other things. Yeah. And I'm like, I think about that for everything in life. It's like, okay, if I were to invest in this baby, like she was a business, you know, like that means I'd be like, on the floor, present with her, turning the phone off, you know? And so I'm trying to push myself to those places.
Wow. Because, I love that. That's good. If I were to focus on my marriage or kids one day, like the way that I focus on my business, that is profound. I like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, let's wrap it up on that note, but if you could just hang out for 2 more seconds, I want to thank everybody for watching. If you made it this far in this interview, you are a true one, for real. But thank you so much for watching. Definitely check out Hannah's stuff, especially I follow her Instagram. I've been following her for years. There's some really, really cool things. I love the Steal My Prayers things, or Steal These Prayers, or follow her. She's pretty active on Twitter too, so check out her Twitter accounts, all this stuff in the links down below. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. God bless and peace out. She was just a country girl from a little country town, engaged to a carpenter. The good man stuck around when 9 months felt like eternity. Judgment fell unrepentantly, feeling like an outcast now. But you saw miracles in the ordinary, and little things turn legendary when you speak, things come alive. Open my eyes to see it. Miracles in the ordinary, and little things turn legendary when you speak, things come alive. Open my eyes to see